Use your powers for evil.
Evil? Your evil is mine.
The Doctor Who podcast. I'm Charles Skaggs, and we're back in the TARDIS once again with my favorite partner in crime and my favorite partner in time, Jesse Jackson.
Hey, Charles. It's been a few weeks. I was on holiday, as they say, in jolly England. And
yes. I hope you had a good vacation.
I had a great vacation. We did. Linda and I got in the car and drove to Louisville, Kentucky. Almost close enough to come by and visit you and the lovely Lori, but not quite.
Once again, you stiffed us.
Yes, and but we did. We got to see several new bourbon distilleries. We got to eat some great food. We got to.
You're just going to need to move to Kentucky because this is where all the bourbon is that you love.
You know, that is Linda would in a minute. That is in her mind. Other people want to retire to Florida. You know, no, Kentucky would be where she would retire if she could. So, and we love it. You know, it's a beautiful area. It's close to you. You know, not that far away from friend of the show, Tom, though a little bit further than, you know, all the way up to Cleveland. But it was, we got to see the barrel this time, the cooperage that makes the bourbon barrows, and that was really good. So it was fun. It was really nice, and we came home a day early because my son's best friend, Colin, got married. He did not want a big wedding. He wanted just him and his fiancée to just go off to somewhere and just with their parents do something. And his mom kind of forced him to do something a little bit more. So he did not know we were showing up, and he was very pleasantly surprised, as was his lovely bride. And so it made for a nice ending to the vacation.
Well, good. It sounds like you had a great trip.
We did, yes.
And that's awesome. So, so that was the delay on your end.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there was a delay on my end. You had tried to get me to round up some co-hosts during your absence, but unfortunately, some real life kind of hit me in the meantime. For those who don't know, my mom was recently diagnosed with liver cancer. And so that obviously threw everything up in the air on my end. So apologies to everybody for not getting an episode out in the meantime, but sometimes these things take precedence. So.
We may give you a little bonus episode. I haven't yet decided if I'm going to tack on my discussion. I had a filmmaker from Australia, or a writer from Australia, on Set Listing Bruce. And we spent about 10 minutes talking Doctor Who and his concerns about Russell T. Davies' writings and his thoughts on the Doctor. And it was from a writer perspective. It was pretty interesting. So I cut that part. I included it in the Bruce Springsteen podcast because, hey, Doctor Who makes everything better.
Exactly. It always does.
But I thought, because we don't have – I think we have some subset of people who listen to both podcasts, but it isn't a big subset. no matter how much they love you and I, they don't
Yes.
always.
Well, they always love you. So.
Oh, they love you too, Charles.
Nah, they tolerate
So
me.
anyway, I may tack that on at the end of this episode just so people can hear it. So,
all right.
But hey,
so
today,
in the meantime, but it actually with your talk of bourbon and everything, it actually works out pretty well because that kind of gets us on a more adult theme.
Yes.
So as I awkwardly segue into our main topic, we're going to talk about a little bit. We're going to go to the adult side of the Doctor Who-niverse, if you will, with our very first Torchwood discussion. And today we're going to talk about Day 1, the second episode ever of Torchwood. Now, I had previously thought that we had discussed the pilot before, but apparently we haven't. Everything changes.
Yes.
But so we're going to have to do that at some later date.
I agree.
But because we're doing kind of a Chris Chibnall Torchwood retrospective,
right.
This obviously makes sense because this is the very first episode of Torchwood written by Chibnall. And looking forward to talking about that with you.
Yeah, me too. Now, I am I think most people know the story. I'll make it very short. Torchwood was my gateway drug to the Doctor Who universe. I was listening to a Firefly podcast, and someone sent in that they had a theory, kind of tongue-in-cheek, that Malcolm Reynolds was really Captain Jack Harkness.
Right.
The premise is Jack can't die, and so they had made the joke that they both like brown coats, and they both just had a kind of brashness to them, and I was fascinated by that, so I went to...
Although Jack's coat's more gray than brown.
Yes, true. They like long coats, I guess, then is probably what they said.
The long coats, yes.
And so I reached out to Ken. Ken lent me his Torchwood episodes, and I loved the series. And I said, I really like Captain Jack. Can you let me see some Doctor Who episodes with him? And he ended up giving me the first season of Eccleston, and by then I was totally, I became...
So did you watch? You didn't watch just Captain Jack's first episode of Doctor Who.
No.
You watched from the beginning and then waited for him.
Yeah, Ken said it's just easier to just, instead of just giving you let you have one or two episodes, let me just give you the first season. You can watch it, and it was one of those things where I had always. You had been telling me for 10 years that you think I'd love the show. Ken is the other side of my, he's talking about, I really think
he's the other devil on your shoulder.
Exactly. I just had two TARDISes on my shoulder, and started watching it and, fell in love, as I think most people would if they, and of course I'm preaching to the choir on this episode, but I think once you try it, you will determine it is arguably, we'll just put it this way, it's one of the finest speculative TV shows ever made. And you certainly would have the discussion, it's the best.
Yes.
I think Star Trek would be in the discussion. But it is certainly, if you look at the depth and how often it recreates itself, it's pretty amazing.
Well, Doctor Who is just one of those shows, those very few shows that can do anything. Mm-hmm. They can tell any kind of story they really wanted to.
Right.
Because it's structured in such a way to do that.
Yeah, it's like Peter David has always said that the Phantom, comic strip, that you can do any kind of comic you want, because of the long history of the family of the father and son generations. That you want a pirate show, you can. You want to do something set in the 20s, you can. You want to do something
in the future,
you can. So that's my Torchwood story. Talk to me about your Torchwood story.
My Torchwood story, obviously, I come from the Doctor Who end,
right? Because
obviously, being a longtime Doctor Who fan, and then with the new series, I knew that, once I got word that they were doing a spin-off, and with Torchwood, of course, being a cute little anagram of Doctor Who.
Right.
And with the fact that Captain Jack was the spin-off character from that, I obviously was going to check this out. And it was kind of intrigued because they had hyped it as essentially like the Doctor Who for adults, in the sense that Doctor Who was essentially an all ages show for the entire family. Torchwood being for the adults and Sarah Jane being geared more toward a younger audience. That's the way they pitched the whole thing. And so Torchwood, I was curious to see where they would go. They would talk about, once we found out that they would talk about more adult subject matter. And this episode is a perfect example of that, because this episode is all about sex. And to quote some, yeah, exactly. Go figure. Yeah, exactly. And that sounds like a great song title. Let's talk about sex.
Yeah.
The idea that they could have more mature themes. I mean, this is actually the very first, a little trivia bit. This is the very first episode set in the Doctor Who franchise that actually features a same-sex kiss between two women.
Very nice.
And this is following, of course, up on the very first same-sex kiss between two men, when you had Captain Jack kissing the Ninth Doctor.
Yes, and
at the end of Series 1.
Right, and it was very interesting.
I mean, you essentially have orgasms that kill human beings in this episode.
Yes.
Which is something, obviously, Doctor Who has never covered before.
Never covered. Not even thought about it.
No.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it is really interesting, and as we get to the details, there's a lot to unpack on this episode. And a lot to unpack about Doctor Who Torchwood is very different, even the dynamics of the team.
Right. Obviously, yeah, these are, now we had Captain Jack, and we were introduced to Toshiko Sato, played by Naoko Mori, in the Aliens of London World War III two-parter in Doctor Who Series 1. So we'd seen her before, but not, she wasn't a major character. She was just more like a kind of a background supportive character in that episode.
You're, as we talked about with Class,
yes,
we're going to watch its spinoff.
Yes.
I've never gone back to watch Sarah Jane Adventures because I wasn't a fan at the time.
Yes.
And just you both have said that there's certainly enjoyable stories in there, but it is not. It is set more for a juvenile show,
yes.
So I just haven't taken the time to watch them. I've seen a couple of select episodes that people have said.
Well, this was Doctor Who Series 1.
Yeah.
That Naoko Mori was in as.
What I guess my.
But it was geared more toward a younger. That story was geared more toward a younger audience.
Well, and I guess what I was trying to do, and I kind of rambled a long time.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to watch Torchwood, but were you excited about it? Did you like the Captain Jack character?
I liked the character enough, obviously, to check out the show. I kind of wanted to see where they would go. I wasn't sure what to expect.
Okay.
So I was, just kind of initially, I want to say reluctant. I was just hesitant. And I mean hesitant, just more like cautious.
Okay.
I guess is the word I was looking for. Because, with a Doctor Who spinoff, we wondered with Class, well, how much of it is it going to relate to Doctor Who?
Right.
And obviously, thankfully, Torchwood related a little bit more to Doctor Who than Class did.
Yes.
Which is one of the reasons I think Torchwood was more successful of a spinoff than Class was.
I agree. Did you enjoy it once you,
I did. I mean, the characters were fun. Some of the stories, were obviously, they weren't the typical Doctor Who stories, so that took a little getting used to for me. But I was okay with that because I was like, okay, let's try something. This is going to be a different show, and hopefully it'll grow into its own thing. And I was willing to give it a chance, and I enjoyed it enough to keep watching. I enjoy Torchwood quite a bit. I still think Children of Earth, the quote-unquote third season, the third series 3, which was just the mini-series of 5 episodes, I think that's the show's highlight.
I agree, and I think that
that's the best the show has ever been, in my opinion.
Yes, and very disturbing and very.
But it's such a great story.
It is a great story, and then I feel like
maybe we'll cover that at some point because Peter Capaldi's in it.
Yeah, I would love to. I was looking forward to them doing the thing with stars,
right?
And I felt like that didn't work as well, and it was not what I was expecting, and I don't think as a good a story as they could have done.
Right. Yeah. Oh, you mean talking? Oh, yeah. The what is it? Miracle Day. Miracle Day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Miracle Day had a great concept, but I don't think the execution was there.
Right.
So a little let down by that, and obviously the show didn't continue on television after that. So.
Right.
But for here, let's talk about day 1.
Absolutely. I was just about to do the same thing. Now that we've kind of talked about it, let's discuss what's this specific episode.
So again, this is written by Chris Chibnall, incoming Doctor Who showrunner, directed by Brian Kelly, and again is the second episode from Torchwood Series 1 in 2006. So we're already putting on 12 years on this thing, if you can believe that. Yeah, starring John Barrowman as Captain Jack Harkness, of course, Eve Myles as Gwen Cooper, Bern Gorman as Owen Harper, Naoko Mori as Toshiko Sato, and Gareth David Lloyd as Iento. And now this episode, this is essentially, to give just a general overview, this is Gwen Cooper's first day on the Torchwood team. She had been recruited by Captain Jack in the pilot episode, Everything Changes, after encountering him and some various Torchwood members. But this is her first interaction as an official member of the team, and she, of course, has the world's worst first day on the job. So I'm definitely looking forward about that. We get the introduction of Kai Owen as Rhys Williams, who becomes, of course, she becomes Gwen's husband, and played by Kai Owen, and he was on he's appeared on an episode of Being Human, the UK version, if you're curious about that. Actually, there's a pretty good Being Human UK connection here with this episode, because Sarah Gregory, who plays Karis Fletcher, the quote-unquote villain of the piece of this episode, was also on Being Human UK. So you could check that out if you're curious. And we get Tom Price as PC Andy Davidson, who actually turned up in a Doctor Who audio adventure for Big Finish, where he played a character named Sergeant Barkley. And that was in the 7th Doctor audio adventure Nightshade, based on the Mark Gatiss novel from back in the day that was adapted for audio by Big Finish.
Nice.
So with that in mind, Jesse, what's your general overview thoughts about this episode?
I felt like it dragged a little bit in the middle. Mm-hmm. I think it had a really strong beginning and a really strong ending, and overall, a good story. I felt like it kind of dragged in the middle.
Yeah.
As we get to specific topic points, I'm sure you have some categories for us to discuss.
Yes.
But I think I'll be able to discuss it in those categories. But overall, it was a good second episode. I think if you're going, I want to show that we're different than Doctor Who. I want to show that we can stretch some boundaries. The cliche, this isn't your father's Doctor Who. That definitely worked in this episode.
Yeah, I think this episode kind of showed the boundary, more of the boundaries where Torchwood could go that Doctor Who wouldn't.
Yes.
For obvious reasons. But now the first episode, pilot episodes are important because, hey, you want people to come back and keep watching episodes.
Yes.
Second episode is almost as important in my opinion because you want to keep them watching.
Right.
And so obviously this kept you watching and kept me watching.
Yes.
So it was at least strong enough to do that, I think.
I agree.
All right. So let's dive right into our topics, which should take you all of 0.0001 seconds to figure out the theme for this week.
Right.
All right. So first topic. I'm bringing sexy back. Yeah. So a little Justin Timberlake.
Yes.
And this is, of course, Captain Jack Harkness. Back in action once again. Last time we saw him was in the Doctor Who Series 1, Episode 13, The Parting of the Ways, where he had been killed, resurrected, and stuck on a station in the future. That's where we left him. And now all of a sudden we find out, well, hey, he's back in 21st century Earth, and, he's now hooked up with Torchwood somehow. And I want to get your thoughts on Barrowman's return as Captain Jack Harkness and what you think of him and the mystery of his return.
So I had forgotten
Yes.
that we didn't know much about Captain Jack.
Right.
If you had not watched Doctor Who, because and even the other members of Torchwood don't know anything.
He seems very enigmatic to them.
Yes. I am ready to. I was surprised about that. To look and see what's going on, what's happening.
Right.
So I really,
because we didn't get much information in the pilot episode of Torchwood about what happened to Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Just somehow he hooked up with Torchwood.
Yeah, and
we don't really get the explanation until later.
Right.
About how he got back to the 21st century. But here, Jack's a little, he doesn't seem he's cheeky, but he's not quite his original flamboyant self.
Right.
And, just his outgoing self, I should say. And Gwen keeps asking everybody questions because she's a cop. She's she has that mentality that like, okay, what's his deal? What's going on with him? Mm-hmm. And, and Jack's interaction with her, I find interesting because she kind of tells him, well, you've been down here too long. And he's kind of like looking to her to kind of remind them of the humanity of it all.
Yeah, it is. And I really, really, he's likable.
Right.
Yet at the same time, he's really tough with the coworkers. Like he mentions, he gets really mad.
Right.
When Owen brings unauthorized tech on a job. It was very, very cool to see him, and it kind of made me go back and remember. Oh yeah, now what's the secret with him? What's going on? So I just thought that was interesting that they.
So
yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, when I was first watching to kind of guess your thing, I didn't know anything about him, and I was intrigued because I had never seen the episodes with him with the Doctor.
Right.
All I just knew is here's this guy who has an American accent, dressing in kind of an army uniform, and I'm right there with him. I don't know what's going on, and I want to figure it out.
Yeah. And that was the question I was really going to ask you because, yeah, I kind of wondered what your perspective was coming from that. Because, but you had never been introduced to Captain Jack before. So, because you didn't have the Doctor Who experience. Now, I did.
Yeah.
I did. So I was like, when I started watching this, I'm like, okay, what's up with Jack?
Yeah.
Because for me, coming from the Doctor Who perspective, it's more like, okay, Jack seems off. Like, he doesn't quite seem like Jack. And I don't know why. So maybe that was one of the things that kind of threw me in it, at least at first, until they explained what was going on.
Yeah.
But, obviously we find out that he's lived quite a life, or a number of lives, if you count the times he's been killed off and returned.
Absolutely.
But we know that, he obviously had his experiences in the London Blitz and whatnot. But, from the Empty Child. Yeah. But, we didn't quite know, like, he has kids and stuff that we find out later on. So he's got all this backstory that gets revealed over the course of the series. And it's obviously changed him.
At this time, did we know Jack was immortal?
I want to say, well, we saw him get resurrected.
Okay.
But I'm trying to remember. It's been a while. I haven't watched the pilot for a while. So I'm kind of thinking that we don't yet.
Well, I know.
I could be wrong, though, so don't quote me on this.
Because I did rewatch the pilot. And there is the pilot where Susie shoots him.
Okay.
It's Susie, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and
the Torchwood member that ends up kind of flipping on them and ends up becoming the person that Gwen replaces on the team.
Right. And so she dies in the first episode.
Right.
So I did not know Jack was immortal. So I was kind of surprised about that. And then it's clear that the other members of Torchwood do not know he's immortal. It just was a nice twist that as a new viewer, I didn't know that. And as I'm rewatching it, I'm going, I know I didn't know it. Should the audience have known it?
Yeah, I'm thinking it was done in such a way to try to obviously make Jack more enigmatic, kind of like the Doctor, because that's one of the great things that kind of hooks you on Doctor Who is the Doctor. He shows certain abilities from time to time. You're not quite sure what his deal is, and with Jack, he's still at this point pretty much a blank slate. So you could kind of do things with his character. And in making him immortal and being able to resurrect, that makes him that more unusual, but also that much more interesting.
And before we move on to our next topic, watching this made me a little sad that Jack and the Capaldi Doctor never had an adventure together.
So far.
Yeah, so far, yes.
Fingers crossed.
Right.
Something in the future, but yeah.
Yes.
So your move, Big Finish, I guess. I don't know.
Exactly. Yes.
Or Chris Chibnall, if there's a 60th anniversary episode or something.
Right.
Yeah. So let's move on to our second topic then. And this is, I believe in miracles. Since you came along, you sexy thing. And that's a classic by Hot Chocolate.
Yes.
Back in the 70s. This is Gwen and the Torchwood team.
I may be seeing a theme.
Yes, you may be.
Topic.
It might be just a little bit obvious. I realize this, but this is Gwen and the Torchwood team, because Gwen introduced to this whole big, wonderful world of Torchwood in this episode. She gets the full treatment with Gwen's first day. So I want to talk about Gwen's horrible first day and her interactions with the Torchwood team as we get to know them as characters and their various personalities. So what are your thoughts on that, Jesse?
The Torchwood team does not get along. That was my thought, right? Is that they are not this happy-go-lucky...
Let's hang out, do stuff together. Right.
Yeah, and that was very interesting and a little unsettling because I didn't remember that part of the show. You know,
well, they do sit around having Chinese food or whatever.
Yes, they do.
So they do eat together at least.
Yes, and they always use chopsticks because on the TV shows, people never use forks. On TV shows, they always use chopsticks.
Yes.
I'm not unhappy that they didn't get along. I'm just saying it reminded it kind of concerned me that, like, oh yeah, that's right. These are not the typical buddies in the TARDIS.
Yeah. So for example, like on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it's not like that kind of Scooby Gang relationship. They're more antagonistic.
Yes.
Okay, so I agree with you. I mean, and did it kind of throw you off and turn you off a little as a viewer?
I did. Now
you're like, why aren't these people getting along? They're supposed to be a team, right?
If I remember correctly, it didn't bother me the first time I watched this.
Yeah.
I kind of was, okay, that's what it is. But watching this again yesterday, I'm like, I don't like Owen very much.
Yeah. Owen is a very hard character to like, particularly for the fact that I think his face looks like he's a frog or toad or something.
Yeah. And
apologies to Bern Gorman, but let's call it a spade.
Yeah, and Toshiko is a little more quiet and meek than I remember her.
Right.
And
well, this is series 1. She does open up a little bit as the show progresses.
Yes, and that's just this perspective, and then I was like, boy, and
Ianto is very like in the background.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was just about to say. Charles is like, he doesn't have a hard,
he's not much of a presence yet.
Yes, exactly. But I love the dynamics. I was okay with that. And Jack is the leader. He is very much the alpha male in the room, and I like that Gwen is pushing him, and she's still, we could help. This isn't just about the mission, and the mission should include more humanity in this. Right. So I like that a lot. And once again, this is not this may be set in the Doctor Who universe, but this is not Doctor Who. And what I don't understand is why this worked so much better than Class, because Class is the same thing, set in the Doctor Who universe. Maybe there was too much teen angst in Class versus this was adult angst.
Yeah, exactly. This is like, well, if Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the Scooby Gang was about 10 years older. Yes, absolutely. And stuck hanging out with one another, but yeah, these initially I think it's mostly Owen Harper's character.
Yes.
That is causing all this friction because he's cutting down everybody left and right. He's this close to being the bully of the group.
Yes.
But he doesn't quite step over the line, but he is very abrasive, and everybody kind of gets prickly around him, and it doesn't allow the team to settle. So that when Gwen comes in my opinion, Gwen is able to stand up to Owen a little bit, and I think that kind of breaks the tension more.
Yeah, I agree, and
because Gwen doesn't take shit from him at all.
No, she doesn't. And I really, really Um, I like Gwen, and I also like Reese.
Right.
Because I remember thinking at the time, there's no way that, they're giving her a boyfriend
Yeah.
they'll end up breaking them up, right? This is going to be this whole.
Or he'll die.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love seeing how supportive he is. And he was like, hey, I'm a special project widow. And not as a complaining, just truly.
No, he's very supportive of her. I mean,
yeah.
They hang out, they go bowling, they do like everyday couple stuff. They're obviously in love.
Yeah.
And so he's all in. Obviously, Gwen feels that she has to be secretive to him about her job with Torchwood at this point. But so far they're handling it at this stage. Anyway.
I agree. Yes.
And obviously that things change because once Reese gets clued in on what Gwen's doing, then that causes some friction. And then of course with Jack, because Gwen, there's something going on between Gwen and Jack, obviously. Yes. Is it a very close friendship, or is it something a little more? There's obviously some kind of flirtation there. But as we know, it doesn't really ever cross the line.
No, and in fact, he will always give people a hard time, right? I mean, and so absolutely.
Yeah. So now Gwen, obviously, she has the very worst first day ever.
Yes.
Because when we go into this story, there's this meteor that falls from the sky, and Gwen's like, "Okay, honey, I guess I gotta go. Bye."
Yeah.
And bails on Reese. She gets picked up by Torchwood in their little stealth SUV that has like running lights along the sides with the Torchwood on the side logo. So I'm not quite sure how secretive that's supposed to be, but go figure. And they show up. There's like army guys there, the British Army, who they dismiss as the amateurs, or at least Owen does, I think. And Jack's got his team, and they're pretty organized, but Gwen obviously hasn't been around, so she's kind of like, okay, where do I go? She forgets stuff in the car, typical awkwardness. And then they go to investigate this meteorite, and Owen taunts her by calling her the new girl, and Gwen kind of tries to retaliate by throwing a chisel at him, but misses and cracks open the meteor, releasing this purple gas, which turns out to be an alien. And so now we have this alien on the loose in the in the UK, thanks to Gwen. So not exactly the best first day impression.
Yeah, it was. And she felt that guilt. She kept saying, "This is my fault." And then, sometimes they use that against her. Other time, Jack was supportive. Like when she was going to work long hours. And he's like, "Well, it is your fault," kind of as a way to support her.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I did like that Gwen does, she's willing to be responsible for her mistake.
Yes.
Like, because toward the end of the episode, she gives the alien inside Karis this choice to, if it wants to survive, she's willing to become a host for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's willing to kind of sacrifice herself for that.
Yes.
So, because she knows that, like, well, she tells everybody, look, this is my fault. This is on me. So that's kind of credit that she's willing to own up her mistake.
Yeah, I think so. And
take the heat for it.
The more I worked and watched Eve, the more I like her.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eve Myles,
yeah. Eve Myles, yeah.
Yeah, she's good. And, obviously because she does have that attitude. She doesn't just roll over. She's willing to stand up to people, and she's willing to stand up for herself. And and that's one of the things I think that makes her a great character.
I agree. Totally agree.
All right. So let's talk about our third topic. And this is a James Brown classic. Stay on the scene like a sex machine.
Nice.
Sex Machine by James Brown from back in the day. So 70s music is always great for sex song titles. I'm just saying.
Absolutely.
And it's so good, especially 70s funk. So yeah, Sex Machine. And this is, of course, Karis Fletcher, played by Sarah Gregory, who is this girl that this young woman that ends up getting taken over by this alien that just so happens to feed off orgasmic energy, but in the process ends up killing the person that she or the alien, take your pick, has sex with in the process. Yeah. They turn to this big pile of dust and then go poof. And Karis essentially literally basks in the afterglow of the orgasm. And I want to get your thoughts on this very interesting alien to the Doctor Who universe, because we've never seen anything like this.
I don't know, right? That it was an interesting alien, and the actress who played in the words of Supernatural, meat suit, was perfect. Very likable, very
sympathetic.
Yes, and very even though she's a killer, very vulnerable.
Right.
So yeah, I like that a lot. It's an interesting premise. The whole scene of them having, sex in the bathroom and the shocking ending.
Now, were you just completely stunned when you saw that bathroom sex scene?
Yes.
And then what happened at the end?
Yes, it was. I was and then
you're just like, holy crap! I don't believe what I just watched. Kind of thing.
and the whole, even like how she gets in the club to the bouncer, and then to watch him watch the tape, which was so, that's almost more shocking, for me, because there's often been, you've seen those kind of quote unquote lovemaking scenes before, but to see someone handling up on his business while watching a tape was whoa, that's very different.
Yeah, that was pretty funny, and then obviously showed again more boundaries that this show is willing to push more than whether you personally approve of them or not. That's up to you. But as far as the show, I think that was interesting. That he's taking care of business a little bit, and obviously gets a rather unexpected ending to his video footage. So that was pretty interesting. Yeah. That was pretty funny. Now, Karis, she ends up, during the course of the episode, they get a hold of her, and they put her in this holding cell to run some tests on her. And all of a sudden, Gwen, who's kind of watching her, starts feeling this uncontrollable urge to kiss her. Mm-hmm. And we find out that Karis is emitting these high levels of pheromones. So she's essentially like this walking aphrodisiac.
Yes.
But, it turns out, the gas is slowly killing her, which gives us our ticking clock. So we got to do something if we want to save this young woman from this alien. And, she uses that. She eventually gets out of the cell. And it creates a pretty funny moment because obviously that footage was recorded on cameras. I don't know why Gwen wouldn't think that this would be, video monitored in the cell, especially since they're running tests on this person, this alien. But so the Torchwood team kind of gets a little surprised too, watching Gwen and Karis make out.
Yes, and then you need to be a man was I thought was a great line. And
right. Because Toshiko particularly was like, ooh, this is kind of interesting. I'm kind of digging this.
She was enjoying the show. She's like, ooh, yes.
Yeah, something tells me Toshiko's quite the slash fic fan.
I think so.
But I thought that was funny to kind of see more meek, mild Toshiko kind of like arch her eyebrow up and go, hey, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Thought that was fun. So they eventually they get the alien out of Karis's body. Jack drops this portable prison cell, traps it inside before it can reach Gwen, and so they separate it from the host. The alien dies in this pile of dust. So that's pretty much it. Then you have like Gwen's kind of coming to terms with this crazy new world that she's in. So I want to get your thoughts, I guess, on what you thought overall with this ending, the way it was resolved with the alien.
So I thought it was very clever. Gwen is so guilty about the person, that she's taking care of.
Mm-hmm.
Karis, right? Karis.
Yeah, Karis. Yeah. Because we find out that she's like working at a sperm donor clinic, and that she's got an ex-boyfriend, so they use that to kind of track her down. And
yeah, and so Gwen offers her host, I'm healthier.
Yeah.
And she isn't suicide. She's actually said, I trust that you guys are going to be able to find a fix. And then Jack goes like, okay, yeah, this is her fault. And then he tricks her, right? He has that portable cell ready. I thought that was a great way to protect, to get the victim and then saved, and then watching the alien die just out of hunger, right? Just out of, they had no...
Right, because, they had no option to survive.
Yeah. So I really liked it. I thought it was a very good way to end it, very clever. Sets up that, once again, we may be a little tougher.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we get a little bit of, after that, we get some stuff between Jack and Gwen. Jack asks her to kind of keep her perspective on the job.
Right.
And she challenges Jack to come clean about what's up with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that the answers to her questions won't make her feel any better.
Yes.
Which sets a very ominous tone.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we kind of end off with Gwen going back to Reese, going back to bed, and just that first day on the job is over.
Yeah, and they watch lasagna. They eat lasagna, and she does dream to, try to turn everything off. Right.
And so overall, I think this is a pretty good episode.
Yeah, I think so too.
For being such, it obviously tried to be very out there, but it kind of showed you what this show could do if it wants. Mm-hmm. And I kind of enjoyed it. So, any other thoughts about this episode before we move on?
No, Charles, I agree with you. I think they swung for the fences.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think it could have used a good rewrite.
Right.
For the middle, but overall, a really strong way to show you that these stories are going to be a little more different, a little more out there, and a little more consequences. So, yeah. Really good.
Yeah. And obviously it's some of the more, I want to say, imaginative Doctor Who type episodes we've seen.
I agree.
Or type stories, even though this is obviously a different show. All right.
Yeah.
So do you have any favorite lines of the episode?
Just one, and I thank you for letting me go first.
Yes.
The whole, he came and went.
Short and sweet.
Yes, indeed. But it was just so funny. Just Jack sits there and with a straight face. I just loved that. As you said, the cheekiness of Jack.
Yeah. And let's see. I like an exchange between Gwen and Owen, where Gwen says, "I'm not being rude or anything. Well, maybe I am, but how do you switch off from all this? What do you do to relax?"
Yeah.
And Owen replies, "I torture people in happy relationships."
Yes, that was very well done. I'm glad you included that.
Which sums up Owen's character perfectly.
Yes, it did. Yes.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like another exchange between Jack and Gwen, where Jack says, "You want to prove yourself? Find her. Get your old pals in the police to do something useful for once." And Gwen replies, "All right, I'll give them a call. Put out an APB. Woman possessed by gas knobbing fellas to death."
Yes, I like that.
And then I have one more from Captain Jack Harkness, who says, "Tosh was right enough. She went for the ex-boyfriend. Lucky she's young. Work your way through my back catalog. We'll be here till the sun explodes."
Yes, great line. I agree.
Very Captain Jack line.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what's your rating for this one?
I give this a strong 8.5 Chinese food. Cartons of Chinese food. It was really good. Like I said, slow a little bit, but overall a really nice episode, and reminds me of why I loved Torchwood so much.
Yeah, it's not the best Torchwood episode, but it is a solid episode, and it obviously was good enough to keep you watching.
Absolutely.
So I'm with you. I also give it an 8.5. 8.5 piles of human dust.
Ah, that is awesome.
So that's what I give that one. So we're totally in sync this week.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, really good choice, Charles. It was just perfect. Just really well done. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, do you have any reverse the polarity by any chance?
I did not. I
do, but
okay.
I want to make sure.
No,
I want to give you
I
a
appreciate
chance
you
to.
do. I know I personally wanted to go back to the first episode of the Doctor meeting Captain Jack. I felt a strong need. So if I'm going to
guess, empty child.
Yeah, that which was a great. We have that discussion. We've covered that on the show.
Right.
So that would have been my guess. Would have been a good one. What did you pick?
Well, I picked, and this may be kind of what you might expect. I picked The Unquiet Dead, the third episode from Series 1 in 2005, written by Mark Gatiss, where we have the Ninth Doctor taking Rose to he wants to try to go to Naples in 1860 to show Rose the past, but they end up in Cardiff in 1869 instead.
Okay.
On Christmas Eve. Now, the reason I chose this episode, at a nearby funeral parlor run by Gabriel Sneed and his servant Gwyneth, played by Eve Myles. So this is Eve's ancestor. Gwyneth.
Yeah, well, very well done.
Or this is Gwen's. I'm sorry, this is Gwen's ancestor, Gwyneth. So played by the same actress, Eve Myles, and we have this corpse of this late Mrs. Pierce that's been taken over by a blue vapor, and she rises from the coffin, kills her mourning grandson before lurching away from the parlor. Gwyneth, a clairvoyant, senses that the corpse is going to see Charles Dickens in a nearby theater, and during the middle of his performance, this blue gaseous vapor. So we have this gaseous alien, which turns out to be a race called the Gelth. And so again, we have another gaseous alien. And the end up the Gelth, we find out, are from this other dimension, and they're trying to use Gwyneth as a bridge to cross this rift, so that they can go to a place where they can build new bodies. And so they end up, they intend to kill the living to give themselves more hosts to take over, and they eventually want to take over the planet. Rose and the Doctor end up getting trapped in this basement, and but Charles Dickens, who is helping them, realizes that the beings are affected by gas, and he goes back to the house, extinguishes these gas lights, turns the gas on full, pulling the Gelth out of the bodies. And the Doctor tells Gwyneth to send the Gelth back, close the rift, but she can't close it or leave. Instead, she takes out a box of matches, intending to ignite the gas and kill the Gelth along with herself. And the Doctor determines Gwyneth is already dead, and that by opening the rift, she had doomed herself. The Doctor, Rose, and Charles Dickens flee the parlor just before it burns and explodes, killing Gwyneth and the Gelth. So they go back to the TARDIS. Dickens thanks them for the help. The Doctor and Rose say their goodbyes, disappear into the TARDIS, and an astounded Dickens walks away through the streets of Cardiff, greeting everyone as he passes and quoting the Christmas Carol, "God bless us, everyone."
Very nice. Good choice.
So, in Quiet Dead, if you want to get the very first appearance of Eve Myles in the Doctor Who universe, and I like to think it's Gwyneth and Gwen, since they have such similar names, are intended to be related. So
yeah, I believe he is.
Yeah, so I like that a lot. We do have some feedback this week, and quite a bit. First I want to give a special shout out to Paul Beck from Australia, because Paul was kind enough to send me a very nice private message about my mom.
Oh, nice.
And he says, heard you've been going through some tough times with your mom at the moment. And apparently Paul had the same issues with his mom a few years ago with cancer. So he and his wife offered me, their best wishes and prayers. But thankfully, Paul's mom is doing fine now and doing okay. So he said that there's always hope. And
yes.
So that was very kind. Paul, I want to thank you very much for that personal message. It was definitely appreciated.
And I know that the rest of the listening base and myself as well are thinking really good thoughts for your mom.
Yeah, my mom is she had some tests recently for liver cancer, and they now seems that the tests are going to go forward so that she can have this procedure to hopefully treat her liver cancer. We're going to find that out in a couple weeks, and fingers crossed that everything goes well. So, but we have hope and we have a game plan. So
good.
Fingers crossed. And thanks everybody who have shared your kind thoughts and prayers. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. On to more uplifting stuff.
Nice.
Since we're on the subject of Paul, let's go ahead and read Paul's first. He says, "Hi, Charles and Jesse. First off, I have to say I haven't seen Torchwood episodes in years and really enjoyed watching this episode. I've forgotten how good this series was. It was so clever to do a more adult show as a spinoff from Doctor Who. Such a shame it didn't last longer than it did. At least now it has another life on Big Finish Audio."
Absolutely.
So yeah, if you want to get some more Torchwood, go check out Big Finish, guys. I keep telling you. So to the episode, which tells the story of Gwen's first day on the job at Torchwood, which involves an alien crashing to Earth. It takes over a young woman's body so it can feed on sexual energy. Just a normal first day at the office, smiley face. Unfortunately for the girl, Karis, she's in a struggle with the entity for her own body. I've always loved the interaction between Captain Jack and Gwen. There was always an underlying attraction between the two, which is evident even in these early episodes. For example, when an officer refers to Gwen as a little girl, Captain Jack responds that she has all the right curves in all the right places.
Yes, that was very funny.
And this episode shows how much compassion Gwen has for people, something the team seems to have lost doing the job they do. Gwen shows how, having made a mistake on her first day of the job, she is eager to correct it, even at the risk of her own life. Something I think that impresses Jack, as he obviously cannot die himself.
Yes.
As for Chibnall's writing, I was impressed how he gave every character their little bit to shine. Even little things like Owen rushing to record Gwen's makeout session with Karis in the Torchwood cell. Very funny.
Yeah, it's very funny.
That was funny, where he's just going, record, record, record.
Yeah, it was.
It was also intriguing how little Jack's team know about him. This sets up some great stuff to come down the line. Anyway, as I said earlier, I really enjoyed this episode and am looking forward to more. As always, sending you both my kindest regards. Keep up the good work, Paul. P.S.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Much appreciated. P.S. Okay, I've got you guys sussed. I know the next episode will be a Chibnall Torchwood story. But which one?
Ah, very nice.
We'll find out here in a minute.
Absolutely.
But first, I want to talk about Holly Mack, Holly from Wisconsin, who was kind enough to drop us a line. So hello once again, Holly. We've missed you. She says, "Hey guys, man, I forgot how much I enjoyed Torchwood Season 1 when I first saw it. Gwen trying to balance her personal life with life in Torchwood starts to make itself more known. Love Jack's a little technobabble is good for the soul line. And also one of the number one rules for alien recovery at a scene, never ever throw a tool to your coworker if your aim's not that great, because you could release a gas alien, right?"
Absolutely.
Jack needs to cut Owen a little slack for that transportable jail cell. I think they don't really have a checklist of stuff to bring out to the field. I agree. I thought he was a little rough on Owen on that one.
I did too.
It was like, so what? It's not like it was a harmful weapon. I love the dinner scene where Tosh, Ianto, and Owen try to find out from Gwen if she knows more about Jack than they do. And the ending I didn't see coming but was worth it shows just how much Jack cares for his team, even if they make a major mistake. I'll wrap it up here. Looking forward to the next Torchwood adventure. Holly from Wisconsin.
Good. Very nice.
Thank you, Holly. Always great to hear from you, and Paul as well, and everybody else that wants to write in. So if you want to do that, how can you do that, Jesse?
Well, if they want to reach me, they can reach me at Jesse Jackson DFW. I can also be reached on Facebook on Jesse Jackson, Louisville, Texas. The show has a Facebook page, Next Stop Everywhere. And
the Doctor Who podcast, yep.
Yes, indeed. What's our Gmail address?
Well, our Gmail address is nextstopeverywheresmg@gmail.com. Don't forget the SMG, everybody. And our Twitter account, of course, nextstopsmg on the Twitter machine.
Mm-hmm.
Please check that out and like us and follow us there, and also help us and go to iTunes if you would, and please like and rate us or whatever on iTunes, because that helps people find us.
Absolutely. We also you can hear Charles and I talk in our brand new podcast.
Yeah.
Titan Talk, the Titans podcast, where we talk about the upcoming DC direct series universe.
Yes. Yeah, the DC Universe, because we actually have a network name now for it. DC Universe is the network name.
Nice.
And so the DC Universe digital series, Titans, based on the DC Comics characters, which obviously we're big fans of.
Absolutely.
And lots of stuff that we're going to talk about there. And we need to do another episode, because we got some pretty big news about a spin-off series already from Titans.
Yes.
That we need to talk about. The Doom Patrol.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Yeah, we need to talk.
And you know what? I bet you there is a blog somewhere
that
tells people about this kind of updates.
Well, it wouldn't be this blog here.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
I think it is. I think that
good coffee
was it.
And hot. Yeah, that's the blog. Yes, my blog of Geeky Things, where I talk about all things Doctor Who and Torchwood and Next Stop Everywhere and comic books, sci-fi goodness. Currently working on my solo Star Wars story review, and news about the other podcasts they do for the Southgate Media Group, including Titan Talk, but also Ghost with the Twin Peaks podcast they do with Zan Sprouse, wife of comic book artist Chris Sprouse, and the Phantom Zone podcast they do with Karen Lindsay, friend of the show, where we talk about all the comic book shows on television, and Lord Almighty, there are aplenty.
Yes, indeed.
So please check those out on the Southgate Media Group as well. I would definitely appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for supporting all the stuff that I do. Otherwise, you can reach me on the Twitter machine at Charles Skaggs, or you can reach me on the Instagram at Charles Skaggs, or Facebook, Charles Skaggs, or Google Plus for all you crazy kids on the Google Plus. Shout out to Karen.
Yes. So tell me.
Yes.
I bet we are doing another Torchwood episode.
Yes, we are.
What one next, though, Charles?
Jesse, we are going to talk The End of Days. And this is the 13th episode from Torchwood Season 1. So we talked about the second episode of Season 1. Now we're going to talk about the season finale, written by Chris Chibnall. And this is a big one. So definitely looking forward to talking about End of Days with you. Next time on Next Stop Everywhere.
Perfect. So, thank you, Charles. As always, it is a joy to talk Doctor Who universe with you. I have a quote for us that comes from the Fourth Doctor.
Yes.
But it sounds like something that is very appropriate for today. The Doctor says the very powerful and the very stupid have one thing in common. They don't alter their views to fit the facts. They alter the facts to fit their views, which can be uncomfortable if you happen to be one of the facts that needs altering.
Very nice.
Very appropriate for today's
society.
Yes, where we live. So
yes, yeah.
All right. And
thanks everybody for listening, and we will see you next time for more Torchwood as we continue our Chris Chibnall Torchwood retrospective right here on Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast.
Yay.
Bye, everybody.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and today I'm taking a page from my other podcast, Doctor Who, and we're doing a very timey-wimey episode. Thanks to the miracle of time zones, I am talking to the future, even though it hasn't happened yet. It is Monday where Gabriel is at. So, good morning, Gabriel. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very good, thanks. It's Monday morning in Melbourne, so fresh and early for us.
Yeah, and so it's Sunday night for me, and we worked out a time to talk. We're going to talk for a little bit. Gabriel has done a wonderful audio drama that will be of interest to you regular listeners. But I want to talk a little bit before we get to that, just some general discussion. So why don't you tell us a little about yourself, Gabriel? Give us your elevator pitch.
Oh man, how do I make it succinct and sound not like I'm pretentiously trying to sell myself? So I'm a Melbourne-based author and playwright. So yeah, I live in Melbourne. I've got a couple of published novels that are kind of like, so it's Boone Shepherd and Boone Shepherd's American Adventure. They're young adult adventure novels. It's kind of like if you imagine Tintin meets Doctor Who set in the world of Lemony Snicket is basically the succinct pitch for that. And I work with a production company in Melbourne called Bitten by Productions, and we do a lot of independent theatre work. So I've written quite a few shows with them. And then outside of that, I'm also one of the hosts of the podcast Movie Maintenance, which is basically what it sounds like. We fix bad movies. However, at the time of recording, I believe we're about two weeks away from Movie Maintenance actually coming to an end, at which point it's going to be replaced with a brand new podcast that we're going to be starting with the same team.
Okay. Why are you deciding to revamp, so to speak, or reboot the franchise in terms of movie discussions?
Look, I guess it's been a long time coming. So the way anybody who's ever heard Movie Maintenance will know, the way it works is that ostensibly every week we have a different, bad or flawed movie that we pitch a better version of. But at a certain point, the show kind of became a lot more, and this is actually sort of how the genesis of my Springsteen radio play came about. The show we became a lot more obsessed with kind of, pitching, like, for example, pitch your ideal Star Wars movie, pitch your ideal biopic, which turned out to be my Springsteen pitch that ended up becoming the stage show and then the radio play. And so at a certain point, it kind of stopped being Movie Maintenance and started being more, I guess, like a platform for us to sort of play in different playgrounds as writers. And then that sort of led into our spin-off audio drama show. And then kind of it gets to a point where you sort of realize that you're sick of talking about things that you don't like. And when you talk about the things that you do like, it's not really movie maintenance because, there's not much point in fixing things that are already great. So we hit this point where, and also I think there's sort of this implicit arrogance if we're all working writers on the show. And, if you go to an industry event and you meet, some important producers like TV or film producers and you're talking to them and they're saying, oh, what do you do? And you're like, I'm on a podcast. And they're like, oh, what's your podcast? And you're like, we fix bad movies. And it comes off as incredibly conceited. So it got to a point where we're like, is doing this podcast for the sake of our broader careers kind of more trouble than it's worth? And also, do we even have that much left to do? Because once you've sort of played in the playground of all your favorite franchises, it can be hard to invest the same passion, particularly if it's like, oh, let's fix Justice League. Who cares about Justice League? So basically, we kind of thought it'd be really cool to come up with a new show that essentially gives us the platform to talk about things that we like, to talk about the things that we enjoy talking about, to discuss the franchises and the stories and the films that we love, and also kind of just have a bit more fun and be a bit looser. So, I mean, yeah, like a lot of the fans of the show sort of contacted us and were quite upset about it ending. The way I see it, it's not so much ending as it's just kind of rebranding as a show that I think we can all enjoy a bit more is probably the best way to put it.
Well, I have not listened to the podcast, but I'm going to Stitcher right now and kind of looking at episodes, and I could see there'd be a lot of fun discussion. I know that I was listening to a couple of Doctor Who podcasts, and they reached the point where they were complaining about every episode. Not minor changes, but every episode they just were complaining about it. And I went, I don't want to listen to people complain about something I love.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's tiresome, isn't it? Like
it is.
All you need to think about is look at this is something that maybe I'm sort of steering more into movie maintenance territory than Springsteen territory here. But I mean, we were very aware of particularly the backlash to Star Wars: The Last Jedi, which divided people so strongly. But you look at some of the YouTube videos about it and they're so vitriolic. And you're kind of sitting there being like, why do you care so much? I mean, people make whole Twitter accounts devoted to savaging The Last Jedi. And I'm like, you do realize that the Star Wars films that you grew up with and you love are still there. They're not going anywhere. But if you get to a point where you expect a franchise to cater specifically to your very particular needs, I mean, you're never going to be surprised. You're never going to get anything new or exciting or interesting if you're completely closed off to anything outside of exactly what you want. And I mean, yeah, I don't know. I just think with things like that, I mean, I do believe that with movie maintenance, we always approach most of what we did from a place of love. I really do believe that. But at the same time, you get tired of having to be negative and you also get tired of hearing negativity as well. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's enough negativity going on at the moment,
I absolutely do. And also, when, I do a Doctor Who podcast, and so we go through, when it's new, we go through a weekly episode where, we talk about the new episodes. And then during the off season, we go back to Classic Who, both after Russell T Davies took over and then the true classic, and we'll talk about it. And we may do a nitpick here, like we're saying, if they had done this here, I think it would have been, the story would have worked better. But and I'm sure that's what a lot of times you guys do too. But it is sometimes, and I get that it's out of love, but I could see how you're like, okay, do I really want to spend another hour talking about, how I would have done Avengers: Infinity War?
Yeah, exactly.
Versus
And I mean,
going out and making my own movie.
Exactly. And that's I think what has always kind of been the other discomfort with movie maintenance is that it's on a certain level, a lot of the show has been fan fiction, but, or kind of, in a roundabout way. It's not like we're writing full scripts. We're just kind of pitching, this is what I would do with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise or the Alien franchise or whatever. And then, occasionally we have fun and do a really subversive, twisted Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey pitch. But at a certain point, it's like, I'm I'm now sorry, excuse me. I'm now predominantly known for playing in other people's playgrounds, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And that's actually why we launched the spin-off Movie Maintenance Presents, the audio drama podcast, because it kind of was like, well, we want to kind of put our money where our mouth is a bit, and sort of show what we're capable of as writers when we're not playing with somebody else's territory, like actually telling our own stories, bringing our own sensibilities to the board, all of that kind of thing. Because, a lot of people come out and they say, it's very easy to criticize, but it's not so easy to make stuff yourself. And I guess as somebody who's got a foot in both camps there, I do think, I think that's a fundamentally flawed argument where somebody's like, as I'm a Doctor Who fan myself, and you see, like, particularly the big, there are certain people for whom anything Stephen Moffat does cannot just, on a matter of principle, cannot be good. And like, I don't really fall into that camp, but you see a lot of people sort of, talking to, I guess, the Moffat bashers and being like, oh, well, make something yourself then before you criticize it. And it's like, well, no, they actually don't have to. Like, if the stipulation for having an opinion on something is that you have to have made something yourself, that's not really how being a fan works. And it's not really how opinions work. Like, you can be a consumer and have an opinion on something without having to understand how it works from the inside. But that said, like, it's a bit different when your podcast, you bill yourselves as writers. You say, we're content producers ourselves, and we're going to tell the franchise heavy hitters how to do it better. That I think invites that criticism a lot more strongly than if I was just a reviewer,
I do. And I also think,
I'm not saying you have to accept wholesale what somebody else does, particularly with a story or a series that you love. But at the same time, I think coming at anything from an approach of, I don't care what they've done, all I care about is what I wanted, and that's what I insist on, and you have to meet my demands, I think that's fundamentally wrong-headed. Like, I think you need to be open to, and I've been thinking about this a lot with Doctor Who lately, because, I think for a lot of, I grew up with the Russell T, or not grew up with, but like when I got into the show was with the Russell T Davies run. And, I loved that. Like, that was in my sort of later years of high school. I've got so many nostalgic connections to that. And then sort of in the Stephen Moffat run, I think the whole time I had been waiting to get that feeling back again, like the feeling that the Russell T Davies years gave me. And it never came. And there were moments where I was like, oh, it's almost there. Oh, that was close to it, or whatever. And it probably wasn't until last year's Christmas special, the Twice Upon a Time, where I kind of sat there and I was like, you know what? It's about time that I just accepted the show for what it is now. Because like the way I love the show is so tied up with a very particular time of my life. That time isn't going to come back again. So the show, the way I know it, isn't going to come back again. So I might as well just kind of accept, hey, you know what? It's a new show with a new vision, and it's a show that rewards change and invites change even, and that's okay. And I think, big franchises like Star Wars or the Avengers or whatever kind of need to be the same if they're going to survive.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is not giving people what they want, but giving people what they didn't know they wanted, if that makes sense.
It totally does. And, Peter David talks a lot about that as a comic book writer, that sometimes when you give your fans exactly what they're asking for, they're disappointed. And the trick is to sell your own story, tell what you need to tell, and tell them, what's perfect is when they give you something, you give them something they didn't know they wanted till after the fact. So I think that's kind of interesting. Who's your doctor?
My doctor's, look, I've been thinking about this quite a bit because for a long time I sort of would have said Christopher Eccleston, because the whole thing, you never really forget your first doctor, and Eccleston was the one who brought me into the show. But in terms of the doctor who was the doctor at the time I was the most passionate about the show, it's David Tennant, because I was kind of at the point where I watched but Eccleston, he only had a year. He didn't really have enough time to really sink into the role, and he was very good in the role, and he got me into the show. So he'll always have a very special place in my heart. But like I've just finished reading Stephen Moffat's novelization of The Day of the Doctor, and that kind of has all of this, extra cool, interesting stuff that sort of fleshes out the episode a lot. And yeah, the more I read it, the more I was like, you know what? Like I think Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi were both great doctors who were underserved by the fact that I don't think the creative vision of the show was that strong during their years. I think it tended to flip-flop year to year depending on what whim Moffat was chasing at any given time, and sometimes that worked brilliantly and sometimes it didn't. But I think it's a safe choice. It's an obvious choice, but I think it's always got to be David Tennant for me.
Well, so I came the same thing. I went to, I started watching, I started with Torchwood, and went, I love this guy, Captain Jack. So I went to my best friend, Whovian friend, and said, hey, Ken, I'd like to see some episodes of Doctor Who that have Jack in it. He said, well, it's just easier. Let me give you the first season with Eccleston. And, I fell in love with the series. And as Charles and I go back and watch classic episodes, I have grown to love Eccleston even more. And I agree. I love Tennant, and he is my doctor. I love Matt Smith. I have loved Capaldi. But I think the true, quote-unquote, tragedy, and it's not a tragedy at all, based on the true meaning of the word, but an entertainment tragedy, is we didn't get another season of Eccleston. That I wish we could have seen what else he would have done, because he's a very interesting doctor, and as I rewatch those episodes, I see what he's doing, and I really like what he did.
Well, I mean, it was almost like, it was almost like, I think after, the show's kind of less than glamorous demise, I think you almost needed somebody like him to kind of bring it back to basics, to strip back the whimsy, and to kind of give you a very kind of hard, down the line, interesting, enigmatic doctor before you could kind of reach, your Matt Smiths or whatever, and the characters who were a bit more out there and zany and everything. It's not to say that Eccleston lacks eccentricity, because he doesn't at all. But I mean, you always just go back and you look at Dalek. I mean, you look at that episode where he confronts the Dalek for the first time, and it's this amazing performance. And it's so, like, even now when I watch it, I'm sitting there being like, holy crap. Like, the stuff he's doing in that is stuff that I don't think we've really seen since. Just kind of the rawness and the intensity of his performance. I mean, it's not to say that there weren't emotional, tough moments with Tennant or Smith, or especially Capaldi, but Eccleston just really brought the guts to the character in a very individual way, and I think that will always be his legacy.
I absolutely agree. What are you thinking about Jodie?
Look, I'm totally cool with a female doctor. I just like I've watched all of Broadchurch, and I like Broadchurch. And, Chris Chibnall, who wrote Broadchurch, is now the showrunner. But I'm kind of sitting here thinking, did you sort of miss by one Broadchurch cast member? Because Jodie Whittaker in Broadchurch I found very one note. And I'm kind of like, Olivia Colman, who's the lead in Broadchurch, like screams doctor. Like everything about her. She has the pathos, she has the toughness, she has the humor, she has all the things that you need, and the hidden depth. She has all the things that you need, I think, to be a convincing doctor. And like, I'm super open to Jodie Whittaker. I mean, we've only seen like a few seconds of her, and I'm very open to it. And I think, I think New Direction is kind of what the show's needed for a while now, and so I'm looking forward to it. She wouldn't have been my choice, but again, like, I'm open to whatever they do, and I'm going to go into it with a completely open mind and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I have not seen Broadchurch, so I don't have that feeling. But I'm excited to see what happened, and I'm looking. I just wanted a good actor, and I think she's going to do that, and so I'm thrilled. Perfect. All right, so now then we'll start set listing Bruce. By the way, Gabriel, just so you know, we're getting a 2-for-1. I'm going to cut this Doctor Who episode discussion and throw it on my Next Stop Everywhere feed. And I will probably put this as a post-credit sequence on the set listing Bruce. So, just in case that my Springsteen fans are going, enough, Jesse, move on. Thank you. That was an enjoyable discussion.
No worries.